Hey everybody. Hey everybody, I'm a little sick today, so please excuse any of my hacking and coughing or sniffling. Let's get to it. When Edge Studio took over Legend of the Five Rings, the tabletop role-playing game, they created a new kind of role-playing game for the L5R world called Adventures in Rokugan. You know what? I have that book right here. There it is. They used Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition as a base using the open game license to try and bring L5R to that popular rule set, but to me, this misses the mark in some major ways. It loses the flavor of clans and schools, hiding those in backgrounds, and replaces it with strange new species like Ghost or Mizoku, and generic classes like Bushi and Ritualist. And the classes themselves can be complicated to use. For example, the Bushi now has a heat system that you have to make sure that you're on top of to do your special moves, and a soul balance system for monks that, depending on where you are karmically, you can get bonuses. If you want it to capture why people like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, to me, simplicity is just one of the biggest factors. But Adventures in Rokugan squanders it. But this isn't a takedown of Adventures in Rokugan, or the current version of Legend of the Five Rings that uses the modified Genesis system, but a demonstration of a new way to take Legend of the Five Rings: the Cypher system. We're going to be getting into the weeds a bit with the Cypher system and with Legend of the Five Rings, so if you're new to either, check out my full review of both games in the description, and then come on back. First, I'd like to point out that the Cypher system has its own open game license, so the rules are free to modify and use, just like Dungeons & Dragons. With the Cypher system, Legend of the Five Rings can keep all those clans, families, and schools that made Legend of the Five Rings so popular, but it will add the simplicity of a D20-based system that's easy to use. But I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want to show you how I do it, and it all starts with character creation. With standard Cypher character creation, you have your descriptor, your type, and your focus, and we're keeping all of that, but with some minor tweaks and renaming. Descriptors were either a character's personality or species, and here we're going to replace that with clan and family. You can have the Kikita or Togashi descriptor. These family descriptors can even be based on descriptors already in the book. For example, the Hida family can have the same features as the Tough descriptor. Type is easy. What we're going to do is make 4 basic types that seem a bit generic at first. We'll take Bushi, Shindoshi Shugenja, Courtier, and Monk. This is going to show the base training of the character. Don't worry, there will be schools that will go on top of these. These can show what a character's main goal or their main kind of training is. Notice the lack of a duelist type or a ninja type. These will be added in a bit later as either flavors or focuses. And yeah, there will be a few flavors as well. Off the top of my head, I'd include combat, spiritual, political, enlightenment, stealth, war, and dueling. You see where I'm going with this now? Lastly, you choose that focus. But instead of the focuses you see in the main Cypher book, you get a school instead. Yes, here is where you can find all those wonderful samurai schools from Legend of the Five Rings. And what's even more perfect is that in the Cypher system, you have 6 tiers of power, and in Legend of the Five Rings, you have 6 ranks in the school. Cypher really is kismet with Legend of the Five Rings. Now your character will be a Miramoto courtier, trained in the Investigator School, or an Asawa Shindoshi, trained in the Elemental School. This feels like Legend of the Five Rings, guys. Now here's a cool little trick you can do in this system. Since type and school are separate, you can make schools have prerequisites for certain types, meaning a Bushi can't join a courtier school. Or, and hear me out, you can let players mix and match how they want, giving us Shindoshi that are good with a blade, or monks that are excellent in court. It's a little bit of freedom that can make for some interesting and unique concepts, and I'm on board. It could also open up different flavors for a character depending on their school. For example, a social illusionist could have the ability to pick from a list another flavor, from, let's say, spiritual, political, or stealth. This is chef's kiss good. Now let's talk about stats. Cypher has those 3 stats: might, speed, and intellect. Now, you might want to replace these with our classic rings: earth, air, fire, water, void. But I'm hesitant to do so. Mostly because replacing 3 stats with 5 will certainly mess up the balance Cypher already has. So you'll have to do a great deal of work to make things right again. Not that you couldn't do that, but like I said, a ton of work to remake something that's already works fine seems like a fool's errand. But you're right, that we need those classic elements in this game somewhere. It's not Legend of the Five Rings without those 5 rings. Good news, I already have the perfect place for them. I think every special ability should be keyed to one of the 5 rings. The kata Soaring Strike, keyed to air. The invocation Tomb of Jade, keyed to earth. Most of these abilities are already keyed to an element in previous editions of L5R, so it'll be easy to bring them into Cypher with those same elements. Then, just have every school have an elemental affinity, and when performing a special ability with the same element that the role is based on, that role is eased. You can even give elemental imbalances to characters, giving them hindrances to use those powers keyed to those certain elements. Now let's talk about some of that special sauce that makes Legend of the Five Rings so great, and what kind of simple but fun rules we can add to Cypher that will mimic them. In the last edition of Legend of the Five Rings, my favorite rule is Strife, a level of stress that can make a stoic samurai break and become emotional. I think the intellect stat in Cypher is a great analog for this. When a creature has a fear attack that would give Strife, instead, it does intellect damage. Intimidation powers can work on intellect. You can even give a player character a free recovery roll if they unmask, allowing them to gain back precious energy by giving up some honor. Oh yeah. Honor, glory, and status, you can just bring these over into Cypher unchanged if you want to keep these rules in your game. You can even have special abilities that get stronger based on these, just like the other editions. Now let's talk about Void Points. In Cypher, you can use XP to re-roll any check, which I think Void would fill in for nicely. You can either call XP Void, or get rid of XP altogether and use a milestone system, and then give characters a Void stat that can go up with a player's tier, or by buying Void through special power, or raising it through character advancements. Any of these 3 ways would be a good way to do it. Now, Void can do all of the things XP can do, except for character advancement. Cypher does have its titular ciphers. You know, those one-use items. And Legend of the Five Rings really doesn't use these kinds of things, with a few exceptions. I mean, you could remove ciphers from the game, which is always an option since ciphers really seem tacked on anyways. But if you must keep them, they can take the form of Agasha Potions, Ninja Poisons, and Omamori Charms. Omamori Charms, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, are like little spiritual blessing tokens. You can even have a group of invocations or Kiho that bestow subtle ciphers onto a character. These could be like magical effects that can be triggered when a character wants to activate them. Lastly, we'll need to add in some dueling rules for those epic Iijitsu duels. And I gotta tell you, I'm stumped. For most of this video, everything in Legend of the Five Rings to Cypher has pretty much been a 1-to-1 conversion. And frankly, there isn't such an analog in Cypher. So, this will be one of the few times you'll have to build that rule from scratch. If you have a great way to make duels in Cypher system, tell me in the comments. I'd love to see what you come up with. That's it! We did it! We made Legend of the Five Rings in the Cypher system. So tell me, do you think this is a better way to play than Adventures in Rokugan? Is it even better than the main Legend of the Five Rings game? I think it has a lot of advantages. And while you're leaving that comment, tell me what world you'd like to see brought to the Cypher system, and maybe I'll make a video about it. If you're looking for more, I have other Legend of the Five Rings and Cypher content right here. So why not go watch another video? And on my sister channel, Dead Unicorn Live, I have actual plays for both systems. Hitting that subscribe button is always a nice treat. Thank you so much. And you can join the Dead Unicorn on my Patreon and Discord, links in the description. If you're playing Legend of the Five Rings, Cypher, or even Adventures in a Rokugan, no shade. Get out there, go roll some dice.